When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there. Episode 139 of Join Up Dots. If I sound all uber enthusiastic and positive, it's just because, as I always try to tell you, if I'm not feeling 100%, I'm not actually feeling 100% today. But that's not going to stop me because I've got a lady on the line who is a medical guru. She's going to reach out over Skype and massage me back to full fitness. I know she's going to do a good job on that. And she was destined to live a life of helping people since getting her first job as a nurse way back in 2008. And I would guess that we can track this side of her character to an even earlier age too, as since entering the medical profession, she's always had the drive not just to get the best out of people physically by using normal medical means, but also by inspiring greatness with alternative medicine and positive reinforcement. And as we see time and time again, it's the mental well-being that really pushes people through the gears and helps them achieve the life that they deserve. And now, as a firm believer and creator of the Magic of Mojo and Bodacious Branding, she's taking this ability to interact, engage and inspire into the business world across the globe. So how did this lady grow up in Washington, D.C., but then end up obtaining a master's in Edinburgh, Scotland? And what made her leave the medical profession and head into the corporate world anyway? And are people surprised when during corporate presentations she suddenly bursts into song to entertain the audience? Well, let's find out as we bring onto the show to start joining up dots the National Association of Professional Women's Woman of the Year, the one and only Ariana Ayu. How are you, Ariana?
I'm great, David. Thank you so much for having me here.
You liar. You're not great. You're not feeling well either. You said that to me earlier.
Well, that's true, but anytime I hear a British voice, it makes me happy. So that always helps amp up the feeling good a little bit more.
It is a funny thing about accents, isn't it? Because I've got this kind of thing that the English accent is a bit drab, really, but the Americans, wow, that's kind of sexy and glam all the way. And whenever I speak to like the Americans, they always say they kind of think that we're like James Bond and we're exotic and sort of dramatic in our character. And it's just the voice, isn't it? But the English voice does appeal to the Americans in the same way as when I hear the Americans talk, I think of like Hollywood and glamour and glitz and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, and it always sounds so sophisticated. The British accent, the English specifically, always sounds very sophisticated. And, so it is funny because when I went to Edinburgh, I was really shocked to hear people like the American accent because I always thought it was, we're those loud Americans,
Well, you are kind of loud, aren't you? And I think that's what we like about it because the English are very much, we like to celebrate the underdog. And if you're watching a sporting event, you always go with the one that isn't going to win. But the Americans, they generally like the champions, don't they? They like the big approach. They like the kind of way and whoa and all that kind of stuff and the whoop whoops and the hollers, which we don't do. We just kind of clap quietly. So it's good, isn't it? Isn't it good to be big and positive instead of like us UK guys that just kind of slink around quietly?
Well, I don't know. I think we like a good underdog story just as well. So I don't know. I think there's room for both, and there are times I've worked with a lot of British people who have kind of more reticence to self-promote. I think that's a big difference between Americans and British. I've found it a lot with my English friends. And then my Scottish friends, they don't really care too much. So
the Scots kind of are like that.
Yes.
The Scots just get on with it, and they live their life in a kind of happy bliss, really, up there. And and if you come down to the UK, the English side, we're all kind of, I don't know, more kind of het up and stressed. And whenever I've been up to Scotland, and especially Edinburgh, where you was at university, it's just kind of a free, happy vibe up there, even though the weather's awful. It's up there, it's freezing cold, it rains all the time. Even when you're in bed you get wet in Edinburgh. But they love it, don't they, the Scots?
Well, that's because they spend all their time in the pubs. I mean, you don't have to worry about anything if you're spending your day in the pub.
I tell you what, you should spend some time with me in my past. God. Now I have 2 pints of lager and I'm anyone's. It just kind of kills me off. I can't do it like I used to. But let's go back in time, because that's what this show is all about, joining up the dots of your life. And you did. You started off in Washington, D.C. as a young American, and you ended up coming kind of full circle. So how did that start? Can you remember the first time when you was a little girl and you thought, yes, I really fancy doing some job that's kind of nurturing or in the medical profession? Or was it something that just kind of stumbled into?
Well, I think I always knew that I enjoyed helping people. I'm the oldest of 3 girls in my family. So, that sort of big sister role has always come very, very easily to me. If you had asked me when I was younger, I wanted to be a rock star. That was my that was my dream all through growing up until maybe like 12, 13, 14. Then I wanted to be a Broadway star. So I actually did my original plan was I was going to school and I was going to do something in music and international relations. I kind of wanted to do both of those, but for some reason, most schools don't. If they're good in one, they're not good in both. So it was a bit of a shift. I would say where I really got my start with helping people professionally, I started my first business actually in 2001. And before I became a nurse, the nursing came sort of way later, but I had a holistic wellness center and I worked with people, a lot of body, mind, spirit sort of work. And what came out of that was I ended up helping people find their life purpose. And it was something that I just did naturally, but I didn't really understand that that's what I was going into. I've always been somebody who does things very intuitively. So I've sort of followed my heart and said, okay, this is the next thing that I need to do right now. And so I don't know that I would have been able to see it from back then, but I love your concept of connecting the dots, because when I look back, it's easy to see, okay, this is how all the dots connect.
And it is a truth. It's a truth through every conversation that I've had that you can look. Because I've only just met you tonight, but I'm looking at the picture of you on Skype, and I can imagine you on Broadway. You just look like one of those people that would be getting up there and booming out, I am what I am, and all these kind of show tunes and stuff. You just kind of seem like that. And the fact that you wanted to be a rock star and now you are sort of a professional corporate presenter that bursts into song during performances is not a million miles away from that, is it really?
It's not really. And I don't do a lot of bursting into song in the middle of while I'm working, but I've definitely found a way to keep that part of myself active. And it is kind of funny. It's I have known people that burst into song, just randomly everywhere, and I'm a little bit more self-contained than that now. But but you're right, it's not that far off. It's still, showing up and doing something in a big way, and I think that's the really big theme for me. Is it's about being out front and inspiring people and helping them to feel things, because that's what music does for us. You hear a piece of music and it instantly brings you back to your first heartbreak. Or I heard a song on the radio the other day, and it was the song that I had with my first boyfriend. It was our song, and we dated probably for 2 weeks. And so for me, I think that was the big thing about music is that it helps you to feel, and we can feel anything, even if it's something we've never felt before. Somebody that's young hears a love song, they get to start to feel what that could be about, and it just opens us to so many possibilities.
I wouldn't think that if I was with somebody for 2 weeks, I don't think I've got enough time to get a song. You must have been really kind of needy or something. I don't know. How did that work in 2 weeks? And you got a song?
Well, we date very differently here in the U.S. than you guys do in the U.K. I met a lot of kids that were in their 20s when I was in graduate school that said they'd never dated people. So here, when I was growing up, at least, that's probably changed now. But I mean, we had, everything is so overly dramatic when you're, 14 years old. And so there was always, we'd sit and listen, talk on the phone and listen to music, or Um, you know, I don't know. There was a lot of sitting, talking on the phone, I think was most of our early dating. But, it was enough that we called each other boyfriend and girlfriend. So that was sort of, that was the way that everyone seemed to date when I grew up, or at least everybody that was in my circle of friends.
You kind of say that you're going out with someone, but you never go anywhere, which is
exactly.
It's that weird kind of almost, how are these two people linked? I've never actually seen them together or talk to each other, but apparently they're boyfriend and girlfriend. It's all mysterious. I think that's that.
Well, I think it's that whole thing about searching for your identity, and so it's a way that you can identify yourself. When you're a teenager, you kind of look to who do you want to identify with, and so I think there was certainly a lot of that with, best friends, and this person is your best friend, and you can identify with that, or this person is your boyfriend, even if it's for a week, and then you can identify with that, and it gives you that identity of, I'm somebody that people want, or that people like. And so I think there's so much of that. That's exactly like you said. There's no action to it. There's maybe not even too many dates, but you're together. So you can identify as, being together, even if you're actually not.
Did you think it's
together.
more important for girls actually growing up? I'm surrounded by girls in my house. I've got 4 daughters and a son. And the son just kind of floats through life. As long as he's got his Xbox and he doesn't get bothered, he's just all right. He's just like a lovable dog in the house. Oh, there was a noise there I just heard. But the girls are very much more highly strung, and they're constantly just focusing in on things that I kind of go, oh, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And as you say, it's all kind of dramas all the time. Do you think it is more important when you are younger to have that kind of appraisal from somebody else as a girl, that there's a boy or somebody that likes you? Is it more important than... I don't remember ever caring one way or the other if somebody liked me when I was growing up.
I think it might be that it is more of a girl thing, especially as you're growing up. Although I will confess that I've been married for about 3 years now, and I'm finally starting to understand men better. So, so I can't claim to know exactly what would motivate guys when they're younger. But I know for girls, there is that. I think it's because our brains work differently. I read a study, and I heard somebody speaking who did a lot of neurological studies and neurobehavioral and that sort of thing. And they said that women's brains are wired differently than men's, that we're more trained and wired to pick up errors. And so I think that there's got to be something with whether it's the chemicals and the hormones, or whether it's just the way that we're wired, as a gross generalization, of course. But I do think that we women tend to analyze things more. And then when you're a teenager and you've got all those new hormones and feelings, and you're trying to figure out who you are and identify what makes you you, I kind of think it's a bit of a recipe for disaster. So I'm really glad I'm past that stage.
Yeah, I tell you what, I couldn't go back and date again. I wouldn't know how to do it. I think one of the things I wouldn't want to do is actually listen to their stories. You know, when you first meet someone and you've got to listen to them all the time. And then once you sort of in a relationship and you've known them for a while, you kind of, that stuff already. So you don't have to go through it. And then you just kind of exist in these kind of little bubbles, and occasionally you bounce onto each other and then you go off in your own way. And it's just kind of nice being in a relationship. I've been with my wife for 25, 30 years or something. And you can just go into a pub and you don't have to ask what she wants to drink, for example. She just goes and sits down and you go off and get a drink and you bring it back. I like that. I like all that kind of not having to make effort, I suppose.
That's interesting. I think my husband is very similar to that, I think, actually. And I think for me, I really love to hear people's stories. I love to hear what makes people tick, and what is it that, that got someone where they were. But I understand also the value of, you don't want to have to do that much work all the time, 24/7 when you're with somebody. So it's interesting. And it's interesting to me that you say that too, because you've built this whole podcast and this whole brand around listening to other people's stories. So I think that's kind of a funny it's a funny sort of contrast to me.
It doesn't make sense, really. I think I'm a bit like Batman. I turn on the mic, and this is a persona that I create for myself. And when I turn off the mic, I kind of go, actually, I'm not really interested for a while. Or leave me alone until I press record. It's almost, I suppose, is it worth saying if it's not being recorded? And I know that's a kind of real strange thing to say, but you must find this when you're doing anything in your sort of corporate world, you build up a larger self than you normally have, and then it's a bigger version of you, and it's kind of exhausting. So when you're not being Ariana, the corporate coach and all that kind of stuff, you just kind of, I don't know, you slope around a little bit more. Do you find that? Because I certainly do.
I can see what you mean with that. I do a lot of work for myself personally, and then with my clients, to help them to be able to kind of be consistent throughout your platforms so that it's not so exhausting. Because I used to feel the same way when I would go somewhere and do an event, and there's some level of it that is just can be physically exhausting when you go. And if you're out, if I'm doing a intensive with, that's a lot of energy that requires of me to do that, and to be able to be on the top of my game at all the time. But then I think where I look at that, as far as if I'm out and I'm doing things, I like to try to bring as much balance as I can into that with making sure I'm getting enough sleep and eating good foods and things like that. Because I try to, for me, when I used to go out, if I was working for 4 days with a client, it would be so exhausting that it might take me a week to recover, maybe even longer. And so I like to sort of arrange it now where I'm getting enough sleep during those times, and I'm not overexerting and overgiving and over-delivering, so that I can be much more even, as opposed to the sort of roller coaster of ups and downs. But I think there's definitely a part when you go out and you get up on stage, or you go and you're leading a group of people in any way, it requires more energy from you. So I think, I don't know, I think it's about, for me, I always try to smooth out those ups and downs so that it's a little bit more even keel.
So what you're saying is you're consistent. You've made your energy levels consistent for what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not perfect at it by by any stretch of the imagination, but that's always my goal, is to make it as consistent as possible so that I don't have, a week that I have to recover, because if you have to recover a week from working with clients, it makes it really difficult to do anything else.
Well, I suppose that sort of comes into what you're creating, Mojo, isn't it? Is that mm-hmm. internal spirit that makes you perform to a higher level. And that's where, mm-hmm. If you lose your mojo, I've said this a lot of times, because in my last job, I lost my mojo and I just wasn't mm-hmm. myself. And I started to, it wasn't that I didn't care. I did care, but I couldn't kind mm-hmm.
of
raise my game enough to perform as I used to perform. And I just kind of felt myself drifting away somewhat. And by being consistent and balancing your energies, you do sort of like, you start whirling the spoon around the mojo pot, and suddenly some kind of chemical happens and you do inspire yourself. Or I believe that's the case. Do you feel that's the same?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, and I love what you about inspiring yourself, because I think a lot of people think that inspiration has to come from outside of you. But really what I found is of ourselves, the more that inspiration can come from within, and then it's so much more juicy and vibrant and fun, because you're really creating out of authenticity. You're not trying to make something out of something that's external. You're taking what you've got and you're making something with that. So to me, it's so much more rewarding, and it does help you to stay consistent and to really maintain. It's not about just tapping into something once and saying, okay, I've got this is the secret sauce and the magic recipe, and I'm going to go right from here and create this big thing. Well, that's great, but then what happens 2 months down the road? You need to be able to get into it again. And if you spend all of your energy with this first little piece, when you get that inspiration, you can't sustain it. And I really think that when we can create that balance and the consistency and really have it where we can just tap in whenever we need it, it's so much easier, and it doesn't require as much, as much recovery time or as much downtime or, even in between time.
I believe that totally. And it's almost, and we have this conversation literally every day, it's almost when you are playing and you are just being your natural self and you're totally in the zone, and people pay you and they pay you really well, and you kind of go, oh, I don't really think I deserve this, because really I'm having too good a time and work should be horrible. And really, I just keep my head down until somebody says, hang on, I've just realised what we're paying you. But once you are in that zone, you are playing to your strengths, and what you find easy is actually providing great value to everybody else. You've just got to find that thing that you do that other people can't do as well, and that is, as we say, being your authentic self. And for all the listeners out there, that is one of the key problems, isn't it? They're so in the rat race, they're so in the day-to-day that they don't give themselves a chance to actually find out what their authentic self is, because they've almost been brainwashed from the early days of going to school, do your homework, go to school, you've got 2 weeks off, and then you've got homework during that, and then you go off to work and you've got university, and it's just that constant aiming for something. So how do they do that? How do they find their authentic self when they are trapped in that day-to-day hustle all the time?
Well, I think you said one of the key words just a few minutes ago, and that's play. What I've found over and over and over again is that when we start to play, again, like really play and do things that we enjoy and that are fun, it helps us to tap into our mojo. It helps get us in there. And it's about that creativity and being able to do things for the fun of it and the joy of it. We are sort of conditioned, as you said, to put our heads down, and we're told that this is how you succeed in life. You work hard, you find a job, you stay there for a long time, you toe the party line, and it doesn't make most of us happy at all. And then some people work really well with that kind of structure, and they find something that suits them, whether they stumble into it or they just got lucky, But for the people that are, you're going through that day-to-day life in sort of a drudgery, and you don't know how to get out of it, the first thing to do really is just to remember how to play and how to have fun. Because when we're children and we played and we would create things with our mind, it's all the kids that you see playing with the box, and the box becomes a spaceship, and all of these different kind of things that we do. Our energy is so fluid, and we're able to move and to create. Because whether you're creating a game, like a make-believe play type game, or you're creating a business, it's the same energy. It's the same place within you that we have to tap into. It's just that as we get older, we're told that that's for children, so we kind of turn that off. And when you know how to turn that, I think of it as sort of like a faucet. You can turn it on at will. And if you turn it on and you get into that creative flow, you get into your mojo, and you have that creativity and that play and that fun moving through your life, it's amazing the kind of things that'll happen because you're in the flow, because you're allowing, and you're in a much more receptive place, as opposed to trying to force things to happen because that's the way that you believe they should be, or that's what you were taught that they were supposed to be. When you're in the flow, there's so much more space for the unexpected. That's why we all get our greatest ideas when we're in the shower, or, someplace that we're kind of indisposed, because we're not thinking so hard, and we're not trying to force, our work, whatever it is, we're not trying to force it into sort of the little boxes that we're told it should be in.
It is amazing, though, isn't it, that we do all have our greatest ideas in the shower. And we basically go in there to wash ourselves. If you could create some kind of business environment with hot water flooding over you all the time, because I was speaking to a chap the other day, and he has got, and this blew my mind, and I still don't know why he's not killing himself, because there must be some electricity involved in this. He's got a broadband sort of Wi-Fi shower head that he can shower and tune into podcasts or radio or whatever, and so that he's actually developing himself at the same time. And he says he doesn't have a single moment in his life that he's not developing himself. Even when he's on the toilet, he's doing something. He says, you got to go into the toilet to do certain things, I suppose. But whilst you're doing those certain things, why don't I listen to Seth Godin or somebody else sort of, motivational and inspirational and all that kind of stuff? And he was saying, he's literally created his whole business in the shower just because of those moments when you're in there and you're not really thinking what you're doing, and bang, that idea comes into your head. And the trouble with that, though, is they're always the most amazing ideas. And then once you towel yourself off and you sort of get to it, you realize that they probably weren't as good as you first thought. But they're still... It's those moments, as you say, you're in the flow, aren't you? You're in the flow and you're just letting yourself go. And that's when life does become easy. I find this fascinating, and I love these kind of conversations, because with you did go to work. You worked hard, and you was in a profession that, it's not easy in any shape or form. I know a few nurses, and they really slog it big time. And now...
Well, and I have to... Oh, sorry.
No,
I have to jump in. I actually was in finance for... many years before nursing. Nursing was sort of that came up out of the wellness center, but I worked in a corporate consulting business. I was a CFO, and then after that I worked as a personal financial advisor. So if you want to talk strenuous, I'm like, and I did all of those while I was building my first business. So that's even, I think, in many ways worse. But maybe just in a different way.
Did you at that time know that it wasn't your thing? When you say that it was strenuous and worse, so why were you doing it?
Well, so I graduated from undergraduate in 2001, and I took a job in a business, corporate business. And while I was doing that, I took that job because I wanted to learn more about finance and how to manage it and run it, and which is the same. I've done a lot of things. Most of the jobs that I've had working for somebody else have been because I wanted to learn something that I knew I would only get in those experiences. So when I graduated, well, even before I graduated from my undergraduate, I had started what would become the Holistic Wellness Center. And back then, there was not all this talk about venture capital, or if there was, I never heard about it. So what I was taught with business was that, you invest your own funds. And so if that means that you work 2 jobs and you're working 60, 80 hours a week, that's what it takes. And so every job I've ever taken with somebody else, I've taken typically because I wanted to learn something, or I had goals that I knew that would accomplish. But I've never been really good at following other people's rules. So I kind of knew from the beginning that, I could try to work for somebody else, but it was not the best personality match for me.
Are you a maverick? Are you a maverick? I've always been told I'm a maverick, or I've got an attitude to authority, and I haven't. I just don't like authority.
Yes, exactly. Well, I always figure, why should I do something somebody else's way if I can find a way that's more efficient?
That's it. We're the same. We're the same. You're just me wearing a dress. We're exactly the same person. Although you don't know if I'm wearing a dress at the moment, I suppose.
Well, I do have my satellite spy cams over the UK, keeping watch on my family. I could, tip that over and take a look.
You wouldn't want to, I promise you.
That's funny. But yeah. I think we rebels always find each other. Because it's much more fun to break the rules if you've got somebody else cheering you on.
It is a funny thing, though. In corporate land, they take you on to do a job, and they take you on to do a job as well as they're paying you. But in many ways, I used to find they would then tie my hands down. And I used to go, look, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just go this to this? And they used to say, well, that's how we've always done it. And I used to go, well, it doesn't mean it's right just because you've always done it. Just because some turtle 20 years ago decided that they wanted to slow everything down. Why can't we, cut that? Oh, no, you don't know the ramifications. It may have a knock-on effect to another department. Well, let's go and talk to that other department then and see, and nobody did. They just kind of accepted what people had always done. It's madness.
Exactly. And that's what makes, to me, having the mindset like you had with, hey, let's do this a different way. We can make it better, faster, smarter, easier, whatever it is. To me, that's the kind of employee that you want. You want somebody who's going to look at what you're doing and say, hey, you know what? We can make this better, and we can make it easier, and we can save you money. And that's why I started getting into doing the corporate culture development, because I found that same thing, especially when I was working as a nurse in the hospitals. They would always say, let's have this open door policy. And if you find something that we can do better, come and tell us and we'll work on it. So, I would always be the one raising my hand saying, hey, you're looking for a way to make this more efficient. What if we do this? And they'd say, yes, that's a great idea. And then nothing would ever happen. Then you'd bring it up again. Yes, we love that idea. Nothing would ever happen. So watching that and seeing the kind of inefficiency, it's mind-boggling. So being the people person that I am, I started to think about that and look and say, how can we make this better? Well, it requires communication. Just like you said, you need to be able to go over and talk to the other department. And whether it's different departments or, the management level and then the staff level, whatever it is, it's really about finding ways to communicate and bring people together, because when you do that, you can create things that are so much better. And who knows better than the people that are in the trenches? If it's a hospital, nobody knows better than the nurses what are going on. But those policies and the things that they know don't necessarily make it up to the management level. And so that's why I'm a great consultant, because I can go in and I can see and I can work with people. But, I have to say, as much as I always tried to be a great employee, people didn't like having me as an employee because I would make them question why they were doing what they had always done.
Now,
Which it sounds like is exactly you did.
Yeah, that is a key thing as well. But that's why you are a great life coach. That's why you're changing people's lives in a positive way, because you're able to ask those questions that get the people to actually think about themselves, even if they don't want to. And once you start asking those questions, I get so many times in these conversations that people say to me, I actually started to say, why am I here? And you kind of think, wow. That's a really deep question. But when you think about that, that's brilliant, because that really says, why am I here? What am I supposed to be giving to the earth? What am I supposed to be giving to the rest of the population? And then that really helps you find, as we were saying, your authentic self and your unique path, isn't it?
Absolutely. To me, that's the question. That's the only question. And I think it's one that I've asked myself ever since I was, as long as I can remember. And I find when you do ask that question and when you think about that, then it helps you understand what your values are. So even if you're stuck in, a corporate job that you hate and feels like there's all of this sort of drudgery every time you go to work, if you understand why you're doing it and you've got a reason for it that is powerful to you, then you can do anything, and you can do it with a good attitude. It's about where your mind is when you go into something, and that's how I was able to get through doing all of those jobs that I hated. I mean, being the finance person to me was the worst. It was so boring and black and white. And there was great value in understanding that for me. And that's what kept me doing it for as long as I did, because I understood where the value was. I understood not just why am I here in the huge, big sense of my life, but I understood in each moment, why am I here in this job that is not fun for me?
I used to
You
go
know,
into my office, and there was a finance. Well, she's still there, Melanie Pettit. Hello to you, and she's a finance lady that I still keep in contact with. And I used to look at the spreadsheets over her shoulders, and I used to say, just change that digit to something and see if anyone spots. And I bet they never spot it. And just move that thing over. Nobody knows what's happening on these spreadsheets. You could just make it up. And she used to say, no, I've got to do it right. I've got to do it right. And that's why I would have been the worst person for finance as well. I used to think, if you save money on this area, they're only going to spend it on some other area. So just share it around with everyone. Sort of communism. That's what I was bringing. I was bringing corporate communism into the world. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I've never thought of that. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a podcasting communist, and we're going to share wealth with everyone. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play a little speech now, and this is something that I love, and I've been bringing it onto the show. And this is Jim Carrey. Tell me what you think about this, Jim Carrey.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job, and our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
That's what we're saying, isn't it?
That's so beautiful. Yeah. I love that.
Have you heard that before?
I think that I haven't actually. And I love Jim Carrey, so I'm glad that you played that. I think that it's so brilliant because it is true. You can fail doing something that you hate, and failure doesn't make us feel good. A lot of great things come out of failure, but why? If you're going to go for something and if you're going to, take the risk of whatever it is, you may as well take a risk and do something that you're excited about and that has the potential to fulfill some greater purpose.
Do you take risk every day now?
I think I do. I don't know that everybody else would qualify them as risks. I'm not a bungee jumper or anything like that, but I think that there are a lot of risks to just show up into the world. I actually think it's one of the riskiest things that we can do. And maybe it's more for girls, because this kind of touches back to something you said earlier about, girls and boys growing up. But I think it takes an incredible amount of courage to step out into the world and be who you are and not apologize for it and not worry about what everybody else is going to say. And, for many of us, we do have that fear of censure, of somebody saying, well, who are you to get up there and talk in front of all of us? What makes you think that you're better than everybody else? I've had several English friends who said, they were kind of taught not to put themselves out there or don't put yourself forward. And to me, it's really easy to be one of the sort of corporate clones or like the factory workers where you line up and you fit in. You go and be the same as everybody else. You look the same, you talk the same, you act, you walk the same, you do the same job. And I think what takes the most courage, what I've found in my life takes the most courage, is actually stepping out and saying, you know what? I'm not the factory worker. I'm not the cog in the wheel. I have a unique gift that I'm here to bring to the world, and I'm going to be visible, and I'm going to show up, and I'm going to be who I am. I've known so many people that I can't even tell you, thousands upon thousands of people that I've met over the course of my lifetime, that when you give them a compliment, they say, oh, no, well, or, you tell them you like their outfit and they say, oh, I got this in the bargain bin. There's always some sort of denial of the good things about them.
I think you've met my wife, haven't you?
Yeah, it's so many people, and I've seen it a lot more with women, but I've known men who do this as well. And I think it's that idea of not wanting to shine too brightly or not wanting to stand out too much because, people who are in the spotlight get hurt. People know about them. They say bad things. As humans, we're judgmental. That's how our brains work. We judge things and decide, saber-toothed tiger or little kitten. It's the way that our brains work. So because we have that built in, we think if I stand up there, I'm going to be judged. So for me, taking risks is about doing things that scare myself. That's a big, you go, oh, this is going to be scary. What if somebody says, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not whatever. It's stepping up anyway and saying, you know what, this is who I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And, as my career has gotten bigger and I've had more attention from media, from, crowds of people getting up in front of them, there are more opportunities to put yourself out there. And I always find the things that scare me the most are the ones that are going to have the most rewards. When I actually step up and take a risk that, is scary, that gives me butterflies in my stomach. I say, oh, okay, this is the next step. And I'm going to jump into it. And I don't know how it's going to go. When I look at all of my dots, backwards through time, every time that I've really stepped up and done something that was a little scary, a little challenging, that felt like a risk, it's had rewards, even if it's not been successful. By stepping up and doing something that feels right to me, I've learned.
I agree with that. I do agree with that totally. And in my whole life, I've always been a public speaker. And you get to that point, and you probably find this, you get to that point that you still get those nerves, but you don't actually remember the big nerves. You have the kind of anticipation, and depending on how the size of the crowd or the length of the course or whatever you're doing, you are scared. You're still scared, even though you've done it 100 times before. But you don't remember that very first time when somebody says to you, get up and say something, and you think, oh my God, I can't do this, I can't do this. Because you've overcome that, and you've just developed a bit, and you've developed a bit, and you've developed a bit. And what the problem is in the world today, and I'm sure the majority of the listeners who are sitting there on the bus, on the train or whatever, or in the shower, we might have a whole herd of people showering at the moment. Wouldn't that be amazing, eh?
Brings new meaning to imagine your audience in their underwear, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Soapy listeners. That's what we want, Ariana.
And they're good-looking ones, too, I can tell.
All my listeners are gorgeous. Every single one of them are the kind of people that you would like to see all soapy, I'm sure. There's no unattractive ones at all. That's other podcasts. They get those ones. So yeah, when you are progressing, you suddenly look back on yourself, you join up those dots, and you kind of go, yeah, I can see where I've come from. And actually, I don't think any of those were insurmountable. They weren't things that were career changing, but they've moved me on. And that's what the people listening have to realise. The first step doesn't have to be a leap. It can just be a slide. It can just be a little step. It can be something just to sort of test the waters. And once you've tested the waters, generally you think, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then you do another one, you do another one, you do another one. And the Bransons and the Donald Trumps and the Arianas, all these people have just done little things, but it leads up to something. And it's the big things that we all see. And we go, that's what I want. It's easy for them. It's okay because they've got the talents. But they didn't have it at the beginning. Totally different animals at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said about, it can be a little step or just a slide that is the biggest piece, because everybody that I've heard talk about motivation, is this, take a leap, feel the fear and do it anyway and go for it. But the leaps are things that you don't have to do every day. It's the little steps that you have to take every day that really make the difference.
My leap was a 5-year slide. It really was. And for the first 3 years, it was a kind of drag. And I was just like pulling myself along, kind of half wanting to do it now, but then didn't have the guts. And then the 4th year, I started speeding up a bit. And by the 5th year, it wasn't really a leap, to be honest. It was just, I was ready for it and away I went. And so it can be dramatic. I know some people that would literally have gone, I hate my boss, I'm going, and bang, and they just sort of walk out, and that's it. It's done in an instant. I was never that brave, and I wouldn't recommend it. But now I've done it, part of me actually kind of, and I don't want the listeners to go, this is what he's saying, but kind of me, I think, actually, now I've done it, I think I could have done it that way as well. Because once you do burn your bridges and once you do make that leap, you hustle like a madman. And you get it going, don't you? You get it going, and you don't know how you get it going. And you try this, and you contact that person, and you speak to this person, and you do this, and you put a website up, and to begin with, nobody notices it at all. And then somebody sends you an email, and you think, oh my God, I've been noticed. And then something else happens, and then the snowball gets going, and you kind of think, actually, was that 5-year slide worth doing, or could I have made it 6 months? Probably could have done it 6 months, but it still wouldn't have been a leap. It would have still been a kind of slippy, slidey, slight mince and a bit of a jump.
Well, and I wonder, I always think if you could have done it in 6 months, then you would have. That I think we have such a tendency as humans to go back and we have all those recriminations of I could have done this, I should have done this, and I heard years ago that when you talk about all the things you should have done, you're shoulding all over yourself. And and I always loved that because, there were reasons and there's value in it taking the 5 years that it takes. And I think there's so much that we think we have to do it right away because we saw somebody else did it right away. But, a lot of the people, at least, who have done the thing where they just, quit and walk out and that's it, they're done. That's been going on in their head for a long time beforehand. And so we have this idea that it was instant, but it really wasn't. It's the same thing. I do a lot of work with branding, and I always say a great brand is effortless. It just looks so clean and easy, and it looks like it takes no work at all. But there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. And I think that's the danger that we get into when we compare ourselves to other people, is that we don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. We don't know how long it's taken them to make up their mind to quit and walk out, because that person who just, tosses the keys to the office at the boss and heads out, they've thought about that. They've rehearsed that mentally 100 times. And if you think about any of the times that you've made a big decision or taken a big leap, there are the times that it happens just instantaneously. You get like that flash of inspiration and go. But for the most part, we've thought about it. We've fantasized about quitting our jobs. We've imagined what it would be like to do something else, even if we don't know the reality of it. Lots of people fantasize about having their own business. And then they get into it and go, well, I wanted a job where I could work less, and I'm working 100 hours a week for myself. And I hate the boss. The boss is so demanding, and it's me. So we think that we have these fantasies and we have these ideas from watching other people. And we don't know what's behind the scenes. We don't know how many times they thought about doing that, or how long it took them to actually make up their mind. And so I think there's value whether you can recognize that it's a 5-year slide, or whether you think it was, 6 months, whatever it was. There's that process, and that process is what helps us grow. I think I connect the dots. I had no idea where I was going to be. I could not in a million years have dreamed up the life that I have right now. It just was completely out of my comfort zone, out of context of everything that I knew in life. And, I got there because I put one foot in front of the other. And sometimes I sat down on the path. It's about that determination to keep going.
So were you holding yourself back? Sorry to jump in, but do you think mentally at the beginning you were holding yourself back because you couldn't believe that you were going to be where you wanted to be?
I wouldn't say just in the beginning. I think there are a billion different ways that I have held myself back, and I think it's something common to humanity. Everybody has it to some degree. My husband has it to hardly at all. I don't know. It's that Scottish, they just get on and do what they need to do and don't worry about it. Well, But, I think everything that I've overcome has been more of a mental challenge than anything else. Every single thing. So, I think our mind is the only thing that is holding us back.
I like that, because what you're saying then is, if you think you can't do something, then you can learn it. Really? Mm-hmm. And so if you go, oh, no, I don't know how to build a website. No, I'm not that type of person. Rubbish, you can do that. And, oh, I don't know how to open a shop. Rubbish, you can do that. The only thing that you can't do is control those negative thoughts in your mind. Or, yes, you can do it, but it's hard. And that's the thing that people need to learn, first of all. And now I'm doing this. I meet up with some of my old workmates, and they kind of go, oh, we always knew you were going to do this. And I kind of go, well, why didn't you tell me then? Because it took me years. If you knew so much about me, just let me in on the secret. But they kind of didn't. And now I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. They all kind of go, yes, it was quite obvious, And it's funny how when you're starting anything, you have this vision that everyone, as you're saying, will censure you, or they will go, no, it's not going to be that easy, or you'll never do it, or you'll still be sitting here in 5 years' time. But once you get the ball rolling, you suddenly find supporters coming from all across the world, and most of them you've never even met before. But and I've mentioned this numerous times because I kind of like this image, but you become like a success vacuum. And more successful people get sucked into your world because they like what you're doing. They're inspired by what you're doing. So they come flying towards you. And then that makes it easier for you to keep going. And then you start collecting more people. And it's not a surprise. I'm very ranty tonight. I don't know what's the matter with me. It's probably because I'm not well. I'm getting it out of my system. I'm sweating a bit here. But thousands and thousands of people. And I bet the majority of those people like having you around, because that's why so many people.
Yeah. I hope they like having me around. And, if not, then I'll get over it. But yeah, I think we have such a great opportunity in our lifetimes with everything that's going on, with the internet and social media. And, I'm not that old. I'm 36. But I remember growing up without a cell phone and without the internet, and when you had to go to the library to find things. And now it's so easy. I have great friends around the world. I have this one woman who's Welsh. She's up in Cardiff. And I met her after I moved back to the States from being in the UK. And she's fantastic, and I love her. And we've just connected. And we have that opportunity now. So I think it's easier than it probably has ever been in the course of humanity to find those supporters, to be that success vacuum, because we're not just dealing with our local tribe or our local village or our local city. We have so many great opportunities. And I think that, kind of like that idea of the success vacuum, it's it's the very old, law of attraction sort of principle of like attracts like. We want to be with people who are similar to us, and not that we surround ourselves with clones, but we want to be with people that we can have the conversations that matter. And I think that's what you're doing with the podcast, is you're having these conversations that matter, that we don't necessarily think to have in our daily lives.
It is strange that we have got these opportunities globally now. The fact that you're sitting wherever you are and I'm sitting wherever I am in my dress, and we're having this conversation and we're both sort of connecting in a very deep, positive way. It blows my mind, really, because I don't really have these conversations with my family. We just kind of say who's in the toilet, how long you're going to be, and that's it. That's what family life is all about. And so the fact that you can have these conversations, you can then record them and then push them out. It's basically what I've done, and it's not new. Millions of people or thousands of people have done this. You've created your own radio show. Now, you go back 20 years ago when, as you were saying, we had to go to libraries. You couldn't do that. You just couldn't. It was just like, if you wanted to be in radio, you had to go to a radio station and get a job. But now you can literally in your head go, what would I most like to do, and almost build the office around you. I'm actually getting spooked just thinking of that now, and I think about it all the time. But it is so amazing the possibilities that people have got, but still they kind of think, oh, I'm in this job because it's a job, it's a safe approach. No, rubbish. Do the job. And if you love the job, brilliant, do it as well as you possibly can. But if you don't like the job, keep doing it, but in the evenings or before or lunchtimes, whatever. For 5 years, people in my office will say, I used to sit there with my laptop on, with headphones in, working, and nobody really knew what I was working on. But for 5 years, I was working on my exit plan, and I was like building things and structuring it. And then I used to go back to work, and then my hour got a little bit longer and a little bit longer, and nobody really realised. And then I started thinking, God, I'd rather be doing this than at work. And that's when my slide, I think, sped up, basically, when I suddenly realised my passion wasn't earning the money, it was creating a future. And I think that's when the leap of faith hit.
Absolutely. Well, and I think there are so many people that have that, they have that understanding, but they've missed what you said about your passion wasn't earning the money. And so many people miss that piece, that, they think that the money, money's going to buy success and happiness and friends and all of that sort of thing. And when I worked as a personal financial advisor, so I was helping other people to manage their money and that sort of thing, my bosses sort of knew that I was different from the rest of the employees. And one time, one of them said to me, I don't know how to motivate you because you're not motivated by money the way everybody else is. And I think when you have that understanding, you realize that it's not about the money per se. It's about what the money brings you. It's about time and freedom and the ability to do something that you love. Then you can take the money piece out of it and you can do something that you're passionate about. There's so many causes that are out in the world and activities that we can all get involved in, whether it's a charity that you want to support or, going out and, I don't know, volunteering with children. There are these different things that we can do, but we're so busy going, oh, I hate my job, or I don't like this, or, oh, I have to get up earlier than I want to. We have all of that negative sort of junk running around in our head that we don't think about, hey, I could go out and I could spend 2 hours helping out at the animal shelter, whatever it is, and that would make me feel good. That would make me enjoy my life a little bit more, and it would bring it, when you do something that gives you purpose like that, it filters in through the rest of your life. So then all of a sudden you're going, I really love to support this animal shelter. I can only get out there once a month, but maybe I can go to my bosses and we can do something at work around this. And maybe it's, one evening out of the year, 2 evenings out of the year that the company will go, because companies like to support those kind of things. So we don't think about how we can bring the things that we love into whatever system we're already working in. We think that we have to, and some of us do have to. You clearly had to quit your job and do this. And I clearly had to not work for other people and do what I'm doing. But some people are good with working their jobs. That works for them, and they get to go home and they get to detach and separate from work. But we don't think about these other things, pulling in the things that we're passionate about and that we love to do, and bringing them into our existing work world.
Let's play the words of Steve Jobs. I normally play this a lot earlier, but I've loved this conversation. But he kind of said the same thing, and it's the theme of the whole show. But what he says, let's listen to him. He says it better than me. This is Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
And that's what you're saying. You're at work and you're doing a job that you don't like, but you like helping animals. And so you do that one thing, and then that leads on to something else, and that leads on something else. But because you're being positive and you are actually not asking for acceptance, you're actually taking control of your own wants and your desires, then that is what he's saying. Even if you're off the beaten path, and you get these people and they own a stall in Mongolia or something, and you think, how the hell did that happen? But it's because they've tried one thing and they've tried another thing, and they've ended up in a place that at the beginning they couldn't even perceive that they were going to be there. But still, it's because you are taking control and you're just doing stuff. Do you think?
Absolutely. And I love that bit by Steve Jobs. The first time I heard that in your show, that was when it really connected what this was about, because I didn't quite get the name, the join up dots. And then I listened to, the first one of your shows that I listened to, and I heard that and I went, wow, that is brilliant. And I think, I'm a big planner. I always have a plan and 2 or 3 backup plans. And that's how my brain works. It helps me feel organized. And what I've always had that's been better than the plan is the willingness to abandon the plan when it's right to do so. And I think that's that piece about not trying to connect the dots forward, understanding that we can't see clearly into the future, and being able to understand it when we go back. I think the only way we can do that, for me, I always call that following my heart. It's that, whether it's following my heart or that gut knowing of, this is the next step that I need to take, and this is when I need to take it. When I follow that, I know that the dots are going to join up. If I don't follow that, then I know that I'm going to have this, mess of yarn or string, as opposed to a nice, clean, even, see if I can say that, a nice, clean, even line where all the dots connect in sequence.
But you can't have that, can you? It's got to be a squiggly life. And that's what you've learned, and that's what I've learned. And I can look back now and I can connect my dots. And as I say, it's so obvious that I should have been doing this. And I can almost go, yes, I was doing this and I was doing that and I was doing this and I was doing that. Oh my God, since I was 8, I was a podcaster. And I just couldn't see it at the time. But success always seems to be a straight line. But anyone who wants success, they just generally think that they do one thing and they do another thing and that hasn't worked. Well, go round it. Go round that thing that doesn't work and make sure that doesn't happen again. Or if it did work, a part of it, take the bits that did work and move it into something else. And it's that constant, isn't it? And it's when success becomes bigger than what you expected and more profitable, and you're playing to your strengths and you're providing value to the world, that's when all the squiggly business suddenly straightens up and you go, oh yeah, I can connect my dots. I can see that. This is where I got there. But while you're doing it, you haven't got a clue. You really haven't got a clue, but you've still got to do stuff. And if you're just sitting there on the sofa every night with Netflix and your husband, then you're only going to have Netflix and your husband. You've got to actually shake things up and move things around a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think where we get into danger and sort of tie ourselves up into knots is when we stop listening to that, our inner knowing and our inner wisdom, and when we think that somebody outside of ourselves has a better answer than we do. Now, there are some things when, if you need somebody to build a building, you sure as heck want to hire an engineer or somebody who understands structure and weight and value. And I think those are the times when, if you're in your mojo, if you're in the flow and you've got that momentum going of your own wisdom, you can go, you know what? This is where I need to hire somebody. This is where I need somebody else's wisdom. And this is where my own wisdom is exactly what I need.
Can you see what your mojo is? If you could tell me your mojo in 3 words, what would it be?
Oh, that's a hard one for me, because for me, mojo is a feeling, and I'm not always great with translating those feelings into words. So I'm going to give it a shot for you. 3 words. I would say intuition, play, and action, because I have to follow my intuition to understand, what's the right timing and what's the right thing to say yes to or no to. And then I have to play. I have to make it fun. I have to enjoy it, because that's where that creative juice sort of comes from. And then action for me is a big one, because I have to be able to actually move things forward. I can't just think about it or talk about it or try to meditate it into existence. It's got to be, I have to take the leap, and by leap, I mean leap or tiny slide or just a step, but I have to do something to move it forward. I can't just expect that things will be handed to me. And when I do my part, when I step forward, when I do an action, when I actually take action on something, then things do get handed to me. You meet the people that have a big impact, but it doesn't happen when you're standing still. So I think for me, for my personal mojo, I think those are the three things. That's where it comes from.
Do you realise your 3 words was basically Steve Jobs' speech condensed to 3 words, wasn't it? Intuition, action, and play. That was exactly what he was saying, and you condensed it to your own personal values.
Well, maybe you, me, and Steve Jobs are all the same person, just in different outfits.
Do you think he wears a dress as well?
I'm sure that they make one with a turtleneck and some denim, so sure, why not?
I don't know where my fascination in wearing a dress is. I do apologise for all the listeners out there. I don't normally dress like that. I'm normally wearing nothing at all. Right, just before we send you back in time on the mic, and this is the part of the show that we call a sermon on the mic, when we send you back to have a one-on-one with your younger self, I've got a question for you. And the question is, to all the listeners out there, can they all have a kick-ass life?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. No question about it. And I think we get to define whoever you are. You get to define what you want that to be. You get to define your kick-ass life. And the moment that you start to define it and say, this is what I really want, then you're tapping into that mojo. You're getting your intuition ready, and you're getting ready to play. Because none of us thinks a kick-ass life is working really hard, getting paid very little, and feeling miserable. Nobody thinks that. So yeah, absolutely.
There you go, listeners.
The same.
All you listeners out there, it's all out there for you. You just have to listen to this lady and take her words of wisdom, because she's laying it for you on the plate. Really is. It's a plate that you should be gorging on a daily basis. When you're in the train and you're on the plane or whatever you're doing, just think of these words and listen back to this conversation, because it's there. It's there. Everything, there's gold in those hills in this episode, and the nuggets that Ariana is sharing with you is absolutely there for you to have a kick-ass life. God, I feel like Jesus is in me today. It's all inspirational. So let's get on to the sermon on the mic, and I'm going to send you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self. And if you could go back in time and have a young one-on-one with the young Ariana, what age would you choose and what would you say? So we're going to find out, because this is the sermon on the mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the sermon on the mic, the sermon on the mic.
Well, hey there. You're just getting ready to go into high school, you're getting ready to start becoming an adult, and there are a lot of messages out there that you need to stop listening to. It's as you grow and you get older, you're going to find that there are so many ways to make yourself wrong. There are so many things that other people are going to tell you that are simply not true for you. It doesn't mean that they're wrong or that they're bad, but they can't speak for you and who you are. Nobody else can tell you what's right for you because they're not you. They don't know you. They don't understand what's going on in the deepest parts of who you are. And that's okay. The value that you're going to find in your life will come from one place, and that is inside of you. Your wisdom and your mistakes are what will take you forward in life. They'll take you to where you want to go. It doesn't matter what you look like, what other people think of you. It doesn't matter if you are different from everybody else. And the truth is that you are. You are unique, and that's okay. You won't see things the way that everybody else sees them. And that's okay too. When you can learn to trust your inner knowing, then you'll know when it's time to find a teacher, to find someone to help you. You don't have to know everything and be everything to anyone, let alone everyone. You just have to keep going. It's about getting up every day and taking a step forward. Some of those days you're going to be unhappy. Some of those days you're going to be unsure. And a lot of those days you are going to doubt yourself. You are going to wonder, what is the point of it all? And you're going to keep going. And by wondering, by asking those questions, asking yourself, why? Asking yourself, what is going on? What's the deeper meaning? What's the magic and the purpose behind it all? Asking those questions is going to take you places that you've never imagined. Dreaming better things for yourself will get you there. The biggest obstacle for you is your own mind. When you can stop telling yourself you're not good enough, when you can stop telling yourself that somebody else knows what's right for you, you will be unstoppable. You have the power within you. And don't forget that. You don't need to know where things are going. You don't need to know what the answers are. And you don't really even need to know where things are leading. You have to trust in yourself and have that faith and have the willingness to keep moving forward every day, even if it's just a little teeny tiny step forward, and it'll work out.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I was in awe of those words. I was trying to write, but I kept on dropping the pen and just listening. And I hope the young Ariana was listening as well. So how can our audience connect with you? All the listeners out there jumping out the shower, still soapy. How can they connect with you, Ariana?
Well, they can connect with me. I'm in most of the major social media, so you can find me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Ariana Ayutopia. Ayutopia is the name of my company. It's Ayutopia International. You can also find me on my website, ayutopia.com. And if you go there, you can also download a free chapter of my book that's coming out in just 2 months. I'm very excited. It's going to be available on Amazon and all the major bookstores, everything else. But you can get a free chapter of it there at ayutopia.com. And I'm on Twitter. I write columns for Inc., which is the INC period. It's the publication for small businesses and entrepreneurs. There's a lot of good ways to connect with me. And you can always send an email as well to our company. It's just support@ayutopia.com. And that's AYUTOPIA. And I called my company Ayutopia because my last name is Ayu. And I love the idea of creating an ideal business. This is my business utopia. So that's where that comes from. That it's about really helping you to create your ideal business, your ideal life, and whatever you want. So I'm very accessible via either my website, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. I put a lot of good food recipes up on Pinterest because who doesn't like looking at pictures of food?
Well, we will have all those links on our show notes. And Ariana, thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up those dots and connecting our pasts is the best way to build our futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.
Yes, hello there. Do you know, during the show, I was just looking through the iTunes reviews that everyone's left. Oh, I've had some amazing ones. Well, every single one is amazing. They're all 5-star. Why will they not be 5-star? Because it's a 5-star show. But I haven't seen one from you. Is it something I've said? Is it me? Please tell me, is it me? Well, if it's just an oversight, please make amends by going over to iTunes and looking for Join Up Dots with David Ralph. And if you could find a few moments to leave a 5-star rating and review, it'd be absolutely amazing. And it will really push my show further up the rankings and make it more of a show that I want to deliver to you on a daily basis. So if you could do that, thank you so much. And I tell you what, I might even come and mow your lawn this Sunday.